understanding unconditional happiness is really what the ancient perennial traditions talked about as enlightenment or awakening. I call it unconditional happiness because the word enlightenment points towards something that is way too overly aggrandized. Like it's made out like it's some state. Unconditional happiness is that. It's just being happy irrespective of your circumstances, which means you are causelessly happy, but it also means that your happiness doesn't have any conditions. So for example, so it's like your happiness is unconditional. Your happiness doesn't therefore have any conditions. There's no conditions on what makes you happy. And that's not to say that you see your best friend on the street and you're going to feel like, oh my God, but that's the thing. This takes us to the first thing. There's no conditions on your happiness. Happiness is not a feeling. So if you feel a certain way when something happens, just know that that is a feeling, which might be a pleasant feeling, like pleasure, but that's not happiness, you see? Most people think that they can only be happy if they have that happy feeling. And they say, how is it possible to find unconditional happiness? I can't always be in this happy feeling. I can't always be blah, 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 blah. Obviously, you can't always be in a constant peak. Because happiness is transcendent of the peaks and troughs. Happiness and peace, true happiness and peace, unconditional happiness is the nature of what we are. In other words, what we are, by default nature, by its default setting, is consistently at peace and happy, but it's transcendent of feeling and emotion. So that basically means that you can be happy irrespective of what your conditions are. So, for example, when I went through my grief when my best friend died, most people, they accumulate the grief with shame, blame, guilt, condemnment, hatred, and all these layers of resistance that prevent them from grieving. That is what causes suffering. People think someone grieving and they're suffering. They're not really suffering if they're grieving properly. They're just resisting their grief. They're resisting it with blame, shame, condemnment, and all these other added things. I should have done this. They should have said that. I should have said this. They should have said that. They should have done this. I should have done all these things, and then what I didn't do, and regret. And regret is another one. But when you're grieving properly, there's no suffering there. You see, there's no actual suffering, right? I was grieving, but I was still perfectly whole, complete, fulfilled, happy, at peace. But I still felt this genuine, like, I can't really put the word for it, but just emotion. Like, have you ever cried before and not known when you're crying? You kind of like laugh crying, like you're crying and you're sad, and then all of a sudden you're laughing, and then all of a sudden you're just in this raw emotion of just like, you don't know if you're happy or sad. You're neither, basically. You're just pure emotion. That's peace. That's unconditional happiness. That's what your experience. That's what your emotions are experienced as, from the point of view of unconditional happiness, where there's no resistance to the emotion taking place. That's how we should experience emotions. So unconditional happiness is through understanding what you essentially are. You need to see that what you are. This is the first fundamental step. Understand what you are has no border or boundary. We think that we're contained inside the body. And this is the step that is absolutely essential to overcome. If you're inside the body, forget about what science says, forget about what philosophy says. You need to get to this fundamental stage of, all my life, I have been told to do this, to do that, to know this, to know that. Everything that you've been told throughout your life, you've been told to look outwardly. The first step, and you've been told to trust somebody else. The first step is to only trust yourself and your direct experience to tell you anything that is true about your experience. Then, with that as the primary mindset, get to know your experience. Understand, well, what is true in your direct experience? What we find is that we either believe that we're separate, which means that we are in the head, in the body, contained by the mind, therefore share the limitations of the mind and the body, or the only other alternative is that we don't know, or we're infinite. There's no other alternative. You can't be anything else. Either there's one thing in the universe, and it is infinite whole, and everything else is made of it. The dissections of it, localizations of it, but nonetheless made of it. Or everything else is of a separate substance, a separate cause. The wood is made of a different substance to the fence. The fence is made of a different substance to the bricks to the grass to the trees, the trees to the metal and the core of the earth. Like everything is a different material. It was born of a different substance. And we are separate individual minds that exist within it. That is a belief we have to overcome. That is a belief that is absolute dog-shite nonsense to ever believe that we are an individual. It's absolute blasphemy to me now. It's the most convoluted idea. It's the idea that is so absurd that it sounds insane. Think about it. Firstly, to believe that your finite localized mind that is supposed to be separate from everything can even have contact with an external world. To even see and perceive something that is not in the same dimension as the perceived reality that you are experiencing it from. How is that possible? How could it be possible to interact with an absolutely separate world? It's insane, right? Because think about it. Your internal experience, thoughts, images, sensations, perceptions, and sounds, you never come into contact with an external world. The only thing you know is hearing, seeing, touching, tasting, and smelling, and variations of that. Someone commented on my video the other day, hey man, you need to include neuroscience in your description. No, I don't. Because he's like, there's 9 senses. No, the 9 senses are variations of the 5 primary senses. So for example, your thoughts are obviously not a sound, but nonetheless, your thoughts appear as a sound-like experience. If you have a feeling, one of the senses in the gut, you have feeling in the gut, that's a sensation. It's a sensation-like sense, you see? It's not a sensation that it's touching our legs or touching an object. It's a sensation-like experience. Even a memory, anything you imagine in your mind, it's a visually perceptual experience. You see it with a visual side, color, size, shape, and form. We need to see that this idea of the world is absolute, materialist paradigm is a load of baloney. It's a load of hollyquaggum. It's a load of phenomenon. It's a load of absolute nonsense. It just makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. If it hasn't struck you by now that this is all a load of nonsense, I don't know what else to do. You know what I mean? Like, there's only so much you can do. Just look at the world. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love it. But it is a load of nonsense. It's a fun, playful load of nonsense. Anyway, the materialist paradigm, it obviously isn't a vibe, right? It's obviously not real. If you don't think that's real, check out any of my other videos where I talk about that. So basically, the thing that we need to see is that the world isn't real. Not just that, but how do we find ourselves in it? Well, the first thing is we have to see that the thing that's supposed to contain our consciousness is another thing contained in consciousness. Just touch your head like this. Notice that what you're doing is you're touching a head. There's no consciousness in the head because you are aware of the outside of the head. You are aware of everything around the head. If you look at yourself, you see everything around it. We're inside a field of consciousness. We're not inside looking outside into an external world. That's the first thing we need to see. You can just do it. Touch your head like this. Look, you're inside. Your head is inside you. It's not outside you. Your head is fully inside you. Just like your thoughts. Your thoughts take place in the same place that your head takes place. Your head takes place in the same place that the sound of the wind takes place. All experience, it takes place inside you. All experience. Then we need to see, well, inside me, what does it mean by me? I mean by you, consciousness. So I'm going to do a new video. I'm going to share an exploration on this, and you're going to enjoy it, and you're going to watch it, you're going to click like, and then you're going to subscribe. Then you're going to join my community. Then you're going to pay me to sell ice to an Eskimo. Thank you. I have a free community, links in the description. See you next time. Take care, guys. Bye.